Hi, good morning. This is the Friday Fireside, and I'm here with Natasha Hritzuk from Warner Brothers Discovery. And you do all the research at the corporate level, right?
That is correct. Yeah, we do cross-enterprise research. So usually lands in three buckets. Anything that would be um, critical dynamics that are happening in the landscape that the business should be aware of.
Yep.
Also focused on consumers and technology. So obviously that's AI, how consumers feel about it, particularly, with respect to production and content, and then the future stuff. But I know
Now,
we're not talking future stuff today. We're talking more landscape strategy
we
dynamics
are,
today.
but we do have to make the point that our favorite little white dog with the crooked
Yes.
ear is coming out in 1 week
1 week.
from when this airs on Supergirl, starring Rhaenyra. No, Millie Alcock.
Yes,
That
Millie Alcock.
gal.
Yes.
Now, and this is not a crossover between Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon and the Superman franchise. This is its own thing.
It's its own thing. It is our DC universe.
Okay. So the question I asked you when we were getting started is
Yeah.
I can look and look and look and look and look, and I'm not getting anything that appeals to me. But all of a sudden, something pops up on my LG screen or my Roku or whatever. And I go, oh, that's cool. I'm going to take a look at that. How do you make sure that that thing that I then spot and say, oh, that's cool, I want to look at that, comes from you guys? You got some new research about that.
Yeah, I'll probably reference two studies that we've done. One is actually the deck still hasn't been 100% designed, so it's kind of in process. So you heard it here first. Um, I will just say that the landscape, and I know we hear this 1,000 times over, but it really just is a fact. The landscape is so cluttered and complicated that the job of marketers is, I'm not going to say harder than ever before, but requires kind of a new perspective on what media planning actually is.
Hmm.
So what we have discovered, and we've done a ton of work around short form, and I think that was the impetus for the study. And what we know is that short form has a really key role triggering people to discover and view content. And also after they viewed, it drives longitudinal engagement. So we know short form is a thing, and we know that UGC is also a really critical factor in driving decision making because there's already that authenticity hurdle that's overcome, which is when the clip comes from me or you. um in addition to the studio, it just adds that layer of validation that it's going to be something that people are already kind of flagging as fun, interesting, watchable, something you should watch. It kind of builds up that zeitgeist. But what is complicated about short form? So if you think about a historical media campaign, you'd start with a trailer. That trailer would probably show up on TV or on some other screen, maybe a billboard, maybe you'd see it at the movie theater, but it was always the trailer. And then you'd kind of have layered on more traditional touch points, interviews with the cast. There might be even something in a print magazine, et cetera, et cetera. And it would be this kind of carefully constructed sequential marketing campaign. What's complicated now in the world of on demand and digital and the world of short form explicitly is that short form is always on. So, this was kind of, even though it was so obvious, I think what this study showed us is that we now live in a world where the minute you release that trailer, and the trailer, okay, the one thing that is still the same is the trailer kicks off this discovery journey. So the trailer is launched. That the minute the trailer is launched, it gets broken apart, it gets reconstituted. People start formulating opinions like, did you see this? Or,
Yep.
here we go, this character, like with you in crypto, it could be like you take a picture of crypto and you have some commentary about like, can't wait to see the dog again. Like all of that gets broken apart and turned into UGC, and you get that sudden kind of flip switch with short form, and that remains on continuously. And that is kind of a different, it's out of our control. We can feed it, we can create content that sits on those platforms, but so much of it is UGC that it's kind of become this whole new kind of critical touch point that feeds the journey from end to end. And that's really interesting because one, it's free marketing to some extent. I mean, UGC is done by others, leveraging our creative, highly influential, drives a lot of eyeballs. But it's also kind of outside of our zone of control, other than those initial
Oh
assets,
yeah.
but
Yeah, yeah.
always on. But here's the tricky bit. So trailers, again, super powerful, drive that initial interest and engagement with the film, that kind of first moment of awareness. Like, didn't know this was something that was going to be released, but now I do, thanks to the trailer. Although, you know, with things like Supergirl, obviously, that sequel's been teased for a long time, or that adjacent film's been teased for a long time. But you get high reach with trailers, and they drive a fair amount of impact. What is complex about short form is it's incredibly fragmented. So because you've got clips, you've got compilations, you've got trailers, you've got commentary, you've got parodies, you've got skits, you've got all these tiny little bitty bits of content that are driving little kind of minuscule bumps in reach. But in the aggregate, short form has the single greatest impact of any touch point in driving the decision to view. So very fragmented, always on, but has more impact than any other touch point.
Okay, I have a question about short form. Now,
Yeah,
I spend most of my days now editing videos. I've got like
yeah.
7 shows for God's sakes. And but they are videos that I can record and download and get to. I wouldn't even know how to edit and take clips out of a Supergirl trailer. And I suspect most people don't unless they're really, really sophisticated. Do you have a strategy that allows your fans to take clips of the trailers and post 5 to 15 second bits?
So
No.
historically it was very ring fenced. Like, we actually did not want consumers getting a hold of the
Yeah,
assets.
I
But
know.
I think, and I can't speak to our marketing groups, I haven't had this explicit conversation. I have with a couple, but who have asked us to do a lot of work around UGC, because I think in the past it was like, hands off, this is our IP and we don't
Sure.
want it adulterated. But the tide is turning. And I think there's this realization that we can create the core assets, but when consumers, when influencers, when the content creators grab that content and reconfigure it, or create like commentary around it, or review it, or
Right.
discuss it, they are single-handedly amplifying what we've built to an extent that would cost us a lot of money to do.
Yeah.
So I think there's been this kind of broader focus on how can we arm these creators with assets that they're free to use.
So
So
you would actually then say, okay, I don't want everybody else to create 5 to 15 second bits, but Warner Brothers could and make those available for people to sample and mix and do all that stuff, right?
I mean, so I guess, the bottom line is it's happening anyway.
That's it.
So it's happening anyway, and people are finding content and creating like, you can't lock these things down. I mean, maybe you can watermark them, but I don't even think that's a deterrent. People are grabbing that content and using that content. So I think our collective view on the research side has been, if we want to manage it at all, like that cat's out of the bag. So then what if we were to create sets of assets that we want
Yeah,
amplified,
yeah,
and
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of control that and give people access? So maybe it's about, we haven't gone this far, like kind of like almost like a developer kit, but like a creator kit, where
Right.
they have a bunch of content that they can work with. But I think the more that we release on our side, the sort of studio generated short form content, our clips, our compilations, our commentary, our interviews, the more we flood the system. Well, we don't want to say flood the system, but the
I
more
know what
we
you mean.
release,
Feed the system.
feed the system, exactly, feed the system, that all then gets, kind of regurgitated
Oh,
and
yeah.
kind of, it's almost like recycling in a way, but it's creative and it's interesting. And these creators put their own spin on it, and it gets pulled out there in
Yeah.
a ton of different interesting ways.
Huge impact. I'm
Huge impact.
reminded, and we might have talked about this before, a couple of years ago, somebody in Warner Brothers and HBO actually created a series on TikTok, um, maximum 25-second clips of Tony Soprano's greatest wax. I'm not quite sure what it was, but it celebrated the Sopranos, I think, 25th
Yes.
anniversary. And it was terrific. It was missing one key thing, and this is the plumbing with TikTok. You couldn't go right from that clip over to HBO.
Oh, can you imagine? That's kind of that like that's
That is
honestly
the be
like
all and end all.
that's the be all end all because we I guess like it's kind of loosely like an attribution layer, but if you had the ability, like you said, to link the content immediately to the streaming service,
Yeah,
I actually think that would be great from a consumer perspective because then you don't have to say like you, Rick, see the
that's right.
clip of
And give
Supergirl.
them that one full episode for free. I'm
Yeah.
now talking to the choir with that, but let them see that full episode without having
Mhm.
to go through the paywall, right? Then after they see that episode, say, we got all of the seasons of this. Click here and you're in. Okay. But okay, so there's playing around with that. Now, that is stuff that's appearing on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and a bunch of
Yeah.
others that I don't pay attention to. Okay, we're going to run out of time, but when you talk about the trailers, I think it's interesting. The trailers are better now, and someone figured out that that first 5 seconds is critical.
Hmm.
If you don't grab them, especially now on mobile, if you don't grab them those first 5 seconds, they're gone,
Yeah.
you
That's
know?
absolutely true.
And okay. Tell me if you have any other findings. We've got about a minute from your research. Anything that surprised you?
I think it was just we knew that short form had impact, and we actually just through all the other research that we've done, we know that it's a critical driver of both discovery and engagement. But we had this like moment where we saw the reach and it was just so low. We're like, wait, what is going on here? How can it have impact? But like very few people are seeing it. And then we realize that it's just so dilutive, like it's so diluted by all the different formats and
Sure.
and the high volume of small clips that was kind of the final piece of the puzzle. But that's a great signal to us because to whatever extent we can help scale any of that short form content. Like right now, it's just a very organic world. People grab stuff, people create stuff, and some people see it, some people don't. And it's kind of whatever gets created kind of creates that stream of content. But I think what's interesting for marketers now is how do we get more control over that process? How do we think about scaling? Because fragmentation isn't great for anyone, honestly. Like I think for consumers, seeing I mean, the variety, you don't have to worry about frequency capping because you're probably not going to see the same thing over and over again. So there's an element of variety, but I do think that there can be a little bit of an overload. And I think if there's some way that we can consolidate or ring fence or amplify um, certain formats that maybe work better than others,
Mm,
um, and I think that that's really where we can maybe even redouble the impact that short form has because that kind of low reach, high impact thing just instinctively feels like there needs to be some sort of redressing.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but when we looked at the formats of short form that have the highest impact, it does tend to be clips and
Got it.
recuts of the trailer. So, that trailer, if you build a good trailer like you'd indicated, that trailer will pay dividends across the social ecosystem. So, a strong trailer and then feeding content to drive clips, those are really the two powerhouses. And I think if you can find ways of scaling those and maybe reducing a bit of that short form noise and fragmentation, it might be a bit more efficient for consumers.
Cool. Well, Natasha, we are out of time. Thank you very much.
Speaking of sound
Fascinating as
bites,
always. And we're going to sign off. And thank you.
my pleasure. It's always so much fun talking to you. So thank you for inviting me back for the fireside.
Okay.